Hello and welcome to IIFL Markets. Today we'll understand all about the concept of ESG, that is environment, social and governance. ESG investing is an emerging concept and is gathering momentum across the world. We have with us Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti to share his insights on this topic. Mr. Haribhakti is a veteran industry leader and is present on the boards of several leading companies in India. He has been actively advocating Indian companies to adopt better ESG practices. Welcome to IIFL Markets, Mr. Haribhakti. Hope all is well at your end in these difficult times.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay. To start off, as we are all aware that India is amongst the few countries in the world who are targeting net zero carbon emission status by 2050. Now, do you think that this is an ambitious target? And what factors do you think could act as facilitators and obstacles to achieve this goal?
So to reach net zero by 2050 for a country like India is actually easy. But it is not a target that a government or somebody can set and then it is cascaded downwards. Actually, what will have to happen is that each one of us, every individual, every enterprise, every company, every government will have to set their own targets, which will ultimately build up to net zero. And why 2050? Why should we wait till 2050? It needs to be done much faster and can be done much faster, particularly in a country like India. We are blessed in many ways to enable us to reach the target. Number one, we are already into a massive energy transition. We are amongst the countries which have amongst the best records in switching to renewables and nuclear as a combination. And so if we were to put a little bit of a foot on the accelerator to energy transition, we can do a whole lot better. We are also a country where most of our car manufacturers have decided to move to EV vehicles.
Yes.
And if we are able to transition rapidly to EV vehicles, that's another nail in the coffin of carbon emissions. And we need to find these large nails that we can put in this coffin to make sure that we reach the target of net zero much earlier than 2050.
Okay, so I want to understand what, according to you, is the role that regulatory bodies and industry bodies can play in reaching this target.
Excellent question, Sheetal. I think in India, the practice has been so far that you start acting when a regulation demands that you act. So we started reporting on business responsibility reporting a few years ago because SEBI mandated it. Now SEBI is saying that from next year, all companies will have to have a business sustainability and social reporting mechanism, the BRSR as it is called. And therefore, we will see a big thrust among the top 1,000 companies in this country moving towards establishing and reporting on BRSR. So the regulatory push in a country like ours is very critical to galvanize the action quite independently. For example, CII has changed the name of its governance committee to the ESG committee. First time this year.
Yeah.
And I'm chairing that committee for Western region. And I'm very excited that CII chose to re-nomenclature the committee to ESG, because that is indeed the ethos that all of us in voluntary bodies like CII and ASSOCHAM and FICCI and IMC and everybody needs to push, because only then will we have that consensus built up right down to yours and my level. How do we change our own carbon footprint? That's where everything begins. And we must all get engaged in doing this. So the role of regulators and bodies like CII and all of them is very, very important in a country like India.
So now coming to, sectors and, companies which you think would be at the forefront and gain the most from this kind of a shift?
So let's first talk about the gain to humanity. That is more important than looking at which company will gain most and therefore where should we quickly move our investment rupees to. That question is also important, but that can wait for a minute.
Mm.
It is so critical that we don't permit warming of our Earth. We have only one planet. This whole idea of our risk management being a move to Mars or to Moon is a very far out idea, and it can be afforded by people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, who are doing their own bit in getting us there. But that's a while away. That's a few more decades away from the 2050 deadline that we have. We need to make sure that our warming stays below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if we want to achieve that, and we want to continue the conditions that has made the human race flourish on our only home, planet Earth, then all of us need to be galvanized into action. Every company, every person. Why do I say that? Because if we don't do it, you could have a complete disaster awaiting us, all of us who are living in Bombay on the coast. Bombay would be at risk because if we have global warming and we have massive glacier melts and the sea levels rise and we have an ingress of seawater into the coastline, Bombay is at severe risk. One of the most financially thriving and populous parts of India can be at risk. And I'm pointing this out not to create a scare, but to point out that this is a risk that we need to manage and we can manage. And we must start managing. There are so many ideas going about in the world, and I'll just name 3 to 5 ideas just to get a quick inventory.
Yes.
So there's an idea of planting 1 trillion trees, which has been put out by the Salesforce Mark Benioff. He's an advocate of 1 trillion trees being planted on Earth. But for planting 1 trillion trees, you need people to tend to them. You need fertilizer, you need protection of the trees, you need all of that. So one has to create that whole infrastructure. Another big idea is to do carbon capture at scale. So whatever carbon has been put out. So Elon Musk has announced $100 million X prize on the entity, a not-for-profit. It could be 5 people who come together, who have the best idea on carbon capture. There's a $100 million prize announced just about a week ago. Now, how do you do this? You can do it by capturing the carbon and putting it under the sea's bed, under the seabed. That's a possibility. There is something that you can do with the air. There are things that you can do across the board, which can bring down the presence of carbon and particulate matter in our atmosphere. Let's take a third big idea. Create a massive solar plant in the Sahara or the Gobi Desert and convert fully. The great thing about renewables is that the countries which are endowed with the capability of doing renewables are the poorest countries on earth. So the whole equation on power can change dramatically because solar power can be done by people with the lowest per capita income, Africa, India, very, very poor parts of China, and so on and so forth. So therefore, there is this amazing capability and technology exists to do it. And so the entire equation of energy transition can completely change. Take another, abundant water. How can we switch from the notion that has been drilled into our heads by many, many people that the next big war of the world will be on water, access to water? Actually, we can make water completely abundant. There are ways to do that. Or take hydrogen as a fuel. If we can get to clean hydrogen, the energy cost of the world will come down so dramatically that we'll virtually have the motive power cheaper than we've ever experienced in the history of mankind by factors. Now, these are just 5 big ideas. Now, how can you capture bits and pieces of these ideas into your own organization based on your own materiality criteria? Where can you make the impact? Can you put in every plant of yours a waste heat recovery mechanism? Or can you make sure that your footprint on water spoilage comes to zero? Or can you make sure that all 6.5 lakh villages in India become plastic waste strewn across the whole place free? All of these are possibilities. The idea is to capture it and bring it into your own context. Use your own materiality in terms of impact that you can have. Do it. Build your whole resources around it. Can we vaccinate India in 6 months? Answer is yes. We need to get together. And it's very possible. So that is the strange thing about this question on who will pick up the gauntlet. The important thing is to realize why the gauntlet needs to be picked up. And there are many great companies in our country which are doing a lot in the area of sustain, and they are called by different nomenclatures. Some of it goes into CSR, some of it goes into employee welfare, some of it goes into sustainability. So there are many, many pockets in which this expenditure gets utilized. And if you see the best in class CSR performers, they are companies which are way above the 2% limit, way above.
Yes.
They spend much more than 2% of profits on CSR. So we need to get rid of this idea, and we need to get ESG into our souls and into our DNA, because the good people of the world, the young employees, will not come to you if you do not seem to be a company with a soul, which wants to do ESG because it is good for the world. And the youngsters want to change the world. That's their biggest motivation. You won't get the attention of the best in class people from MBA schools, from engineering colleges, from IITs, from IIMs. You simply won't get them if you don't have a soul. And therefore, it's important to integrate this into strategic planning, into making sure that you don't see it as a nice to do, or because regulation says I'm going to do it, or because I'll get some more investment from somebody, I'll do it. No, I'll do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's what makes me sustainable and makes my world sustainable.
True. So, now I want to touch upon this concept of ESG investing, what is it? And of course, in India, it's still in a nascent stage. So first, help us understand what is it, and do you see it evolving significantly in the future, across the world and especially in India as well?
Absolutely. It is inevitable, unstoppable, and happening as we are speaking. BlackRock, Blackstone, Teachers Pension Fund, all the large sovereign funds on planet Earth. Nobody is going to move their money if there is no ESG. And they are going to visibly lift their money away from situations which are not ESG compliant. So as of today, there is both a negative threat being held out to those who are continuing to pollute. So there's a huge backlash on investing in oil, for example, in oil companies. But of course, Warren Buffett, on the other hand, said the other day that I'm quite happy investing in oil companies so long as they make money for me. But he will also change his tune. I'm 100% sure he will have to, because the world is shying away and the world is finding cheaper ways to power itself than oil. So simply the economics of it is going to drive it. And when economics and ESG ideas converge, which is where technology is leading us to. Therefore, the thought process in all of these funds that I mentioned is that if technology is enabling a clean future at a lower cost, then we should invest only in those companies which are capturing those technologies and making them happen within themselves. So they will invest in companies which are rapidly transitioning out of oil. They will invest in companies which are making plastic biodegradable, for example, or using full recycling. So if those who are practicing circular economy will be the ones who will be invested in. So what is the difference between a financial report and an integrated report? Let's look at the baseline. Financial report only tells you the past, what you did and what you got from it. Correct? Historic. Whereas your integrated report, which reports on what you have done to your six cap, gives you a window into the future and tells you as to whether this company is likely to be cost competitive and competitively advantaged in the future. That is why everybody needs to move from that old idea of just looking at shareholder returns to stakeholder returns, because you need to earn your license to exist as a company. You exist in society because society has given you a license, right? People are expressing their preferences by stopping to buy from polluters. Simply will stop buying.
Yeah.
There's a whole host of people who will do that today. And therefore, it's no longer a nice to have. It has to go, as I said, into the DNA, into the strategic plans, has to move into the mainstream of corporate thinking. Everybody is going to invest only if there is ESG. People are going to lend money to you also only if you are ESG. And not only you, but people who you are influencing as part of the ecosystem, if they are not into this whole thought process, investment or debt will not come in. And therefore, it is high time that we start voluntarily taking that as part of the agenda.
Okay. Now, I want to understand that, if you look at some of the ESG funds that are there in India, they are largely currently focused on the large caps, the blue chip companies. What is really stopping them from investing in mid caps, according to you?
Because they've not understood that ESG investing is an obsolete idea already. Every company must have an ESG soul. You simply cannot and should not be touching companies which are doing exactly the wrong thing than being environmental stewards, which is the E of the ESG. It's called environmental stewardship. Socially responsible. You cannot have human rights violations going on and still invest in a company which is using child labor, has working conditions which are not acceptable, or unsafe working, or people dying on the job, and all of that. People simply won't tolerate that.
Yes.
And if you don't have purposeful governance, which is dedicated to enhancing the value of all stakeholders, people will stop investing in you. And that is the whole nub of making sure that you don't have, there should not be an ESG fund. Every investment that you're considering should be seen through the lens of ESG. This whole idea of having this broken out piece, which is only for ESG, has no meaning.
Yeah.
That is why you are asking me the question hesitatingly that these fellows have not done that well, because it's not understood. They think that if you don't invest in a wine company or a company that is actually doing some pollution, then you're all right, then you're an ESG. That is not the point at all. What has happened in the world, Sheetal? Frameworks have been established. Now those frameworks are getting merged into one single framework. The Value Reporting Foundation has been established in the United States of America, which has Michael Bloomberg as its chairperson and Judge Mervyn King as its co-chairperson. That is going to integrate GRI and SASB. They have decided to merge the two biggest frameworks for reporting on sustainability have merged together. And that work is on. Under the IFRS, they are creating a sustainability standards board, which will completely formalize the way that companies report on sustainability. Quite simultaneously, the Big Four got together under the aegis of the World Economic Forum and established measurement criteria, which are now available for all of us to see. And integrated reporting is becoming an established fact. The whole sustainability standards will almost force financial reporting to transition to integrated reporting. Now, in that world, which is going to emerge in 2 years, if you are not prepared today and you're still looking at people who are ESG sort of just started, it's not going to work. Everybody will have to switch and transform. Nobody accepted, because we are all in this together.
Right.
So with global standards, global frameworks, measurements, materiality criteria, reporting standards, all of that coming into place so rapidly. And this has all happened in the last 1.5 years. SDGs are in place. ESG is in place. The push of all these investors, the large agglomerations of money, is all in one direction. Employees, consumers, everybody is cottoned onto this. Now in this environment, to say that I'm going to pick those who don't have a particular attribute and I'm going to have an ESG fund has no meaning at all.
Just to follow up, you mentioned about integration of different types of, reporting formats. Now here I've often seen, when we interact with corporates and even reporters, we understand that there is still a gap in assigning a monetary value to a lot of environment related disclosures, and the reporting there is pretty nascent. So how do we really bring them both on the one page? On one hand, the accounting has evolved significantly, and those practices are really on a higher level, and on the ENS side, it is still developing. So how do we,
you are absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Sheetal. This is what's going to happen, because people like us who are dedicated to this are going to push it at board level. There's going to be a far greater desire to discuss this as a board issue. Every meeting, we are now asking the companies to report on our commitment to net zero. So suppose, let's take an actual case. Let's say a company has declared that it will be net zero by 2035. So now we want a plan from 2021 to 2035. And we want to look at it every quarter. And that's what's going to create the greater ability. People will, at one time, computers were in the same space that you are asking today. Have you got a computer? That was the first question.
Yeah.
Then what have you automated? Then there was a little bit of, then people started saying, do you have an ERP? Otherwise, it was all on some standard accounting software which kept numbers on two sides of a straight line. And that's how accounting was happening. So then the ERP came. And from ERP, we then transited to blockchain, and we transited to automated data set capture. We went through that whole rapid cycle of making financial accounting almost automated. Today, you virtually need no human intervention to do accounting. The bankers will be the new accountants of the world. So that has transitioned. We are working along similar paths in the ESG space to make all of this come alive, become standardized. We are talking about an ESG RP. Like you have an ERP, we're talking about an ESG RP, so that you can capture data sets, push them through. And I'm talking about a Netflix of sustainability. So how nice would it be if you had a series of Netflix where the first episode is Asian Paints and its sustainability ideas. The second episode is Hindustan Lever. The third episode is IIFL, if you like. So that's the way the world will go. And then the whole idea will start blossoming into something that should be captured by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that education phase that we are going through, that rapid learning phase, and that organizing ourselves, preparing the groundwork, preparing the infrastructure phase that we are going through today. But we have everybody positioned. Framework setters are in position, standard setters are in position, reporting standards are in shape, consultants are in place, everybody is in. The infrastructure has been laid down. Now we need to capture it and move forward.
Okay. Coming back to the topic of ESG reporting, sustainability reporting, and integrated reports, these different formats. So there has been a regulatory push to it, and a lot of companies. There has been a rise in the number of companies reporting on these formats. So, do you think that in India we are following the best practices which are being adopted globally, or do you think there's a lot to do for us, to really, for India Inc. rather, to really live up to that level?
No, we are leading the world. When the 17 SDGs came out, for a few years, India was in the lead position of implementation. Somewhere along the line, the person who was driving it, he finished his tenure of office in the ministry and things slackened. But even today, India's own governmental reporting on sustainability factors is phenomenal. People don't know this, but there are 100 different criteria on which our macro data is available using sustainability constructs. So we are not backward at all.
Okay.
In fact, some of the highest ranked companies on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index are Indian companies.
Yes.
So there is no notion we should keep in our minds that we are behind or lagging. This whole BRSR is built from GRI.
Right.
So it's not as if this framework has been established to just on its own. It is established using a global framework and tweaking it a little bit. That's all. So we can be leaders in this space. India can be leaders.
Okay, just another follow-up here. Do you think the mid-cap and the smaller cap companies are also not just reporting and even adopting these measures to the extent that they should? Okay.
They are. And they are doing it more or less out of compulsion.
Yeah,
because for the big boy, no, not regulatory, where they have to supply their goods, they have to prove that they are ESG. So Hindustan Lever has a network which buys from, say, 5,000 companies in India. All these 5,000 fellows will have to do ESG reporting.
Yes.
Because otherwise, how will Hindustan Lever say that I'm the best in the world?
Yes. Okay.
They can't. So these 5,000 guys who are in their orbit or ecosystem, as it is called, will all start reporting. And then what is happening today is they are teaching their ecosystem how to do this reporting, working with them, building the whole thing. Until there was this regulatory thrust, all these things had not opened up. Now the regulator has come in, and Mr. Ajay Tyagi is totally serious about this BRSR, making it mandatory in 2 years' time. And then it will extend to all listed companies. And if it is in the listed company universe and their ecosystem doesn't have it, the MSMEs cannot function. So it will all come automatically through the pull factor.
Yeah. Okay. I want to understand, according to you, again, I'm coming back, because as a retail investor, we would still want to understand how you identify the companies, which have superior practices, which are on the front.
So there are 5 global raters who are giving out sustainability rating scores. Okay. So the first thing people have begun to look at is, what is your sustainability score? Batao. BRR का अलग रैंकिंग है, अभी BRSR का नया रैंकिंग चालू हो जाएगा, 500 कंपनीज NSE की रेट होने लगी है. तो all of this is coming into place. So you can discriminate.
Right.
And so people just are looking at these scores. For the first time, we have these scores. We had until last year only 100 companies which had an NSE given score. Now that has gone up to 500. And there are new people every day. This morning I was speaking to one of them who is, providing the infrastructure to give this ESG score. So they have started building up their business, and they are the ones who will help us to discriminate between in the same industry. So they are doing industry studies, domain specific studies, individual company studies, सब कर रहे हैं, और सबको marks दे रहे हैं. तो हमारे यहाँ तो marks ही सब कुछ है ना, सब लोगों को examination में number 1 आना है, तो अब सब दौड़ लगाएंगे.
Okay, this is one more question, which I often feel, which is for my understanding more than anything else, is that a lot of material companies, metals and materials companies, which are so heavily dependent on the natural resources, and that is their business model, right? To track and to convert those resources and then sell them. And then they are also doing a lot of work on the other side on the environment front, and to protect and to give back, and also circular economy and all those aspects. So how do you think really are they, I sometimes wonder if it's really possible to really give it back by adding more, like that circular economy concept, like when you take so much,
brilliant question, Sheetal. So 3 ideas I would like to put before your listeners. Number 1 is that some of the best work in coming to net zero is being done by these companies which are doing deep mining and other work with natural resources. And I know them intimately, and so I can tell you that they are sincerely doing phenomenal work all over the world. And this is not just the Indian mining companies which are doing this great work. It is all over the world. Second, this whole idea of circular economy is going to a level where people are envisioning a future where you will not need to make from extracted material new inputs to rebuild the infrastructure that the world will need for 2 reasons. 1, the world is going to reach peak population very soon. In fact, the second biggest global risk seen today is depopulation. Okay? So we are seeing a reverse, and the other thing is that the level of satisfaction at a unit cost is falling at a phenomenal pace. This morning I was listening to Ray Kurzweil's 2019 lecture on how compute power is doubling every year, and how all of that is happening and enabling the world to actually do far more at far less cost, far more rapidly than ever before. So that's the world of abundance. That is the second thought that I want to put in the minds of listeners. And the last and third thought is that technology is changing the way extraction is happening. And therefore it is making it safer, it is making it very accurate, it is making it much less costly, and the whole conversion process is being aided by energy which is obtained from renewable sources. So one of the largest deployment is happening through energy utilization, and that is now moving to renewables at a very rapid pace. And we have the world has figured out some very ingenious ideas on carbon capture, as I said, hydrogen usage, clean hydrogen. And therefore, the whole idea of energy transition will hit us in the middle of our eyes very soon. So if you have clean homes, okay, you have clean factories, clean energy, and EV cars, you are 75% of your way to net zero. And to achieve all of that at global scale, technology exists today. We just need to change our mindsets and embrace it and make it happen.
Okay. Any parting thoughts that you want to leave with our viewers?
Only one. It is not nice to have to think about ESG. It has to be part of your soul. It has to be part of your DNA. Embrace it, and you will see huge advantage coming your way.
Thank you so much, Mr. Haribhakti, for joining us today. It was indeed a delight and very insightful discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you.